Hello and welcome to another Emperor's Path video. This is part one in a series of weathering some Hornby Railroad oil wagons. So sit back, watch this video, enjoy, and I'll see you guys later. Hello and welcome to another Emperor's Path video. So funds, money and all the gump that comes in between when building a model train set have meant that I have had to sort of hold fast on finishing off the track and maybe have a look at projects where I already have all the things that I need for them, or at least can do the majority of them. So since the last video of looking at the layout, I've managed to finish the second loop, which isn't really anything extra to what you've already seen. All it means is that I've just connected all the points up from the previous video that you saw. I will be going into a video on how I do my track laying and stuff like that so people can see, as well as we'll be doing some weathering later down the line. However, whilst I have all of this stuff already, I thought I'd have a look at addressing some of the rolling stock that I have. So what I've done is I've built up a small collection of these little tankers that come in the Hornby Railroad section, and what I want to do is try and make them look a little bit more uniform together, whilst also giving them that weathered look. I also want to address having a look at maybe sort of fixing some of the problems that are on there, the little imperfections. For example, right down the middle of each wagon is the seam line from where the two parts fit together. I'm going to have a look at trying to fix that. And because these are weathered, it hopefully won't be as obvious as some of the things that you'd maybe do on a coach. So what I'm going to be doing is trying to give a repaint to all of the wagons that you see here. The main reason for that is because I want them all to be uniform. Now, in Portsmouth, in the middle of the 20th century, there was a BP section of the line that came off towards Hilsey, and I thought, brilliant, okay, that means that I can get some oil wagons on there and imagine that they went all the way to the docks or they went off the island from various points of view. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be respraying all of these wagons the same colour. I might go for something a little bit different, something nice and that pops, or I might go for sort of the black that I've seen in a lot of the photos that come up, a little bit like this Texaco one here. So these were weathered by Fratton Model Shop. Small amendment to that, we have two model shops in Portsmouth, both on the same main road. These were purchased from the model shop in Fratton rather than Fratton Model Shop. I'll leave a link to their website in the description below. Support your local shop where you can. And yeah, I'm going to try and fill the gaps on the sort of the seam that's in the middle of the models. Further down the line, when I have some money, I'm going to fix the coupling situation as well, because a lot of these ones here at the front have metal D-lock couplings, and I think one or two at the back do as well. And I'm going to upgrade them to either KD couplings or at least NEM pockets, as I found some suppliers online who can switch those over, which is great. So then once I've painted them, I'm going to weather them up, make them look nice and grimy. If you have only just discovered my channel, I come from a background of Warhammer sort of modelling, where everything looks grimy, dingy, very dark and rusty sort of thing. So that's what I want to do with these. You may have seen in the video my Intercity Royal Mail, which was my childhood engine. Came in the Woolworths Royal Mail set years and years ago. Found that in my mum and dad's loft. Sadly, nothing else, cannot find any other parts of it. But what I did was I attached the transfers and weathered it up a little bit, and I really like how it looks. It sort of really brings down the look of the loco, so hopefully I'll be able to do that to these wagons. Now, I have spoken to various sources, and they're going to be trying to get me some Royal Mail coaches to go with that Royal Mail Intercity, because I do want that running around the layout for nostalgia. So this loco won't be pulling them, but because I've just recently weathered it, I wanted to sort of show it off. I'm going to put some images of the before and after on your screens in a second for you as well, so you can see what it was like before. And yeah, we're going to weather these locos, make them look really nice and grimy. And I think I'm going to try and get it so that my Class 33, my Lima Class 33, will probably be taking those around the layout. But it'll be something nice other than just coaches to be going around the layout at the moment, as from a freight point of view, I can't think of anything that would be going through Portsmouth if you were basing it on the real location. This is the only thing sort of freight-wise I could find on the island. However, if you did imagine that the old dock railway that used to go off at the Portsmouth and Southsea area was still around, maybe that could bring in the idea of adding more freight. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get to spraying all of these locos. I'm going to remove all the wheels and I'm going to undercoat them in black primer, and then I'll be back with you guys. Okay, so what I've done with all of these is I have removed the wheels from all of the different wagons, and I've also removed the top section that sits on the roof, mainly because I just want to be able to paint them separately. That was actually extremely easy to do. I'm going to try and do it now without breaking anything, because that's always going to happen. So it's literally a case of you just pop the end out and then just give a gentle little click out the top and you can remove that. So what I'm going to do with those is I'm going to try and paint it in a contrasting colour to the wagon, so the chances are it's probably going to be either sort of like a burnished sort of coppery silver, or it's going to be something that's a little bit tarnished, but it will still contrast nicely if I go for a black or a dark colour on there. So the wagons actually can come off the bases, and they are two pieces, so what I might do is pop them all off the bases, the chassis, so that I can glue them together and then make sure that they're all nicely lined up. To be fair, I could probably do that whilst they're still sitting on here anyway. What I'll do is I will decide what I'm going to do with that, make sure that all these parts are taken off, and then move ahead. So the next part you're going to see is probably either me taking them off their bases or just gluing them together whilst they're still on the bases and sort of filling in those mould lines. Or they're not even mould lines, they're just straight up gaps. Some of these ones that are from the Fratter model shop will have been filled in on there as well. So I am going to crack on with that. So during this process I used a nail cleaner to unhook the little clips that held them onto the wagon chassis, and as you can see here, by using that nail cleaner I'm able to just pop them out quite simply. I then used poly cement to make sure that I could glue the two pieces together. This was extremely easy. So last night I glued all of the body shells together, let them dry overnight just to make sure that the poly cement dried absolutely fine. And then what I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to fill in cracks and clean up some of the flash that's left over. What I'm going to use for this is just a cheap hobby knife. If I'm very honest, you don't want to use a brand new one that's extra sharp, but if you only have one of these you can as well. This is from a Wilkinson's pack. I think I paid £1 for 2 of them. You can have a little mini file or a nail file to hand if you want, and then the main thing that I'm going to be using to fill the gaps is this Vallejo plastic putty, which is really nice because it's got a really fine spout on it, so you're not going to be using too much. You can use stuff like green stuff and things like that as well if you wish, but this is my preferred method of doing it. When it came to scraping off all of the flash and extra parts on here, I just used the knife, making sure that I was always tilting the knife and making sure that I was scraping away from myself wherever possible, mainly so that I didn't get hurt or stab myself. There are safe ways to do this, including using mould line removers made by Citadel and possibly other companies out there. I tend to do this where I scrape away with the blade and don't point the blade directly at any part of my skin whilst doing so. There you go. So I've got most of the mould lines off, so I'm going to use the plastic putty, and all I'm going to do is, you could do it only on the areas where it's needed specifically, but all I'm going to do, let's see if this will focus, is I'm going to put the plastic putty, and it comes out in a nice little line like this. I'm just going to draw it along that line. So you don't need a lot because this is going to fill in those gaps really nicely. just smear all the stuff that I've just put on. I was going to spray all of the wagon shells whilst they were apart, but then I thought, well, if I'm going to be using the filler on it afterwards, I don't necessarily want to have to then repaint them with the black again. So all I'm doing here is, you can do it left to right, you can do it up or down, and all this does is it pushes the filler into the gaps that are already there. And if you do it sort of like that, what it does is it means that the filler rubs off on the areas where it's going to be nice and smooth, but fills the gaps where you need it to go. So there's not a lot that's really gone in that end bit there, but it's filled the gap. Come on, focus. There we go. So yeah, so that white line has filled the gap there. On the top here it's a little bit more. I'm just gonna slowly, let's say you can rub side to side. If you do the side to side motion on it, it will fill the gaps in on both ways if you need it to, but it if you're rubbing it like that, it will automatically catch against the bit where it may need to fill in the gap, and it's really handy from that point of view. And this sort of goes a little bit chalky, so it becomes exceedingly easy to rub off with your hand if you need to, but you can use a file if you want. I mean, it's quite fine stuff, and it's going to fix most of the problem that comes on these cheap wagons. As I say, you're going to be painting them, well, we're going to be respraying them in a minute anyway, so you're going to cover up a lot of those imperfections, but it just means that you can go in, and this is where my finger won't fit in the gap, so I'm just going to use the end of that nail file bit there just to smooth it in, or at least get it in the nook and cranny. And that bit's probably, let's see if you can see it, that bit at the top there is probably going to have some weathering or some oils or something dripping down. Come on. There you go. It's probably going to have some bits dripping down from there, so it's not too much of a problem, but it means that you're getting it in the little gaps that are created there. And then you can do it down there as well. And then yeah, let's say it fills in a lot of the holes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of the wagons that I've got and do this so that it makes it nice and just covers up the mould lines. It might be something that you don't necessarily care about, in which case you can skip ahead. If you come across a certain area, like I've got a little bit there where there's still a little bit of a gap, I probably could have used a little bit more, so you just go back over it now that you've done it and just massage it, just put it in, get it in that nice little crevice there. You can use, if you want to use a cheaper version of this, you can just use straight up poly filler to fill the gaps. I feel like it's the same stuff. It's got that chalky kind of texture when it dries. The only difference is that this one is a plastic putty. I'm not really sure. Like, this one's got a nice small nozzle on it, but if you don't mind using poly filler and you want a cheap way of doing it, you can give that a go. I use poly filler when I'm making bases and stuff on models, so I think it's a very good little thing to have. You can either get the powdered stuff that you add water to, or you can get tubes of it, or you can get big tubs of it, but I usually have a tub of it sitting around because I love using it to add texture to things, and you can add sand to it, and that's how I used to make bases. So yeah, so that's filled in all the gaps there. I'm going to do all of the rest of the wagon tops for this, and I'll come back to you when they're done. Okay, so I've gone through, cleaned up all the mould lines and filled in all the gaps. Some of them needed it a lot more than others. These ones that were pre-weathered by the local shop, I'm intrigued as to how they're going to come out, because there's a lot more weathering on them than I thought, and the paint on them's quite thick. And in fact, I don't think I mentioned this, one of these ones, when I took them off the carriages and pulled them apart, there was loads of blue tack and a stone inside them. So one thing I did forget to do on this and on all of them, the little cap that sits at the top, that is a separate piece that sort of is on one half that folds over onto the rest of the wagon, so that part isn't on the seam line. You can use your knife, and all you do is you just use the flat edge again. So the same with trying to remove the mould lines, you just scrape it across the top there just to remove the mould line that's on there, because there is a mould line on there, and that will, when you respray these, that will show up massively. What you can do is you can give a light rub down on some of these, because you may just have some of the dust left over. This stuff is extremely close to resembling polyfiller, so I don't know whether I've been duped or not. So if you're doing this at home and you want to do it on the cheap, then you can just use polyfiller, just use your finger. If you can get a small applicator to get that on there, that'll work as well. So what I'm going to do with these now is I'm going to spray the chassis, I'm going to spray the tops with a black Halfords primer, which is this matte black spray paint. If you are spraying in the summer, it shouldn't be a problem, but if you are spraying in the winter, a good way to make sure that your can is ready for spraying, as well as shaking it loads, is to put it in a, not fully submerged, you sort of want to put it in a bucket, or if you've got a little container. So I have a little spray thing I use to sort of clean out my airbrushing, and then I sort of empty it. What you can do is fill this with warm water. Sorry, it looks minging, it's because there's about 1 million different colours in there. What you can do is fill this with warm water and put your canister in there. It doesn't need to fill all the way up, it's just enough to sort of warm the can up. Make sure it's warm, not boiling water, because then you could have a serious accident. So yeah, you put warm water in. What it does is it warms the canister up, so then you can give it a shake, and you'll find that the paint will come out a lot better. The actual performance of the canister will be better as well. If you're using metal models, what you can also do is use a hairdryer on a very low setting and just quickly warm the models up. Don't do it with plastic or resin, because they will warp. But yeah, if you're using some of the old lead models or anything like that, I used it on my old Hobbit army for playing Middle Earth, and if you give it a little bit of a warm coat, warm up the models a very tiny bit, it means that the spray paint adheres to it a lot better. So a little trick for you. So yeah, I'm gonna give these a little rub down, nothing too special. I'm then gonna spray them all with the Halfords primer. Just a light coating of it, I don't need them to be thick, it's just something so that when I start airbrushing them, the colours are gonna adhere to it quite well. Let's say I might do it in black, so I might probably, we'll see. You'll see in a second how well I'm gonna spray them. The wagon chassis as well, I'm gonna do those. I'm gonna try and do those very lightly, because I don't need them to be bad. I just want to take that glossy plastic sheen off the bodies. So yeah, I'll be back with you guys in a sec. Very quickly, I forgot to mention, so obviously using a spray can, one tool that I found extremely useful, my hands aren't what they used to be. I don't have the dexterity I used to have, and using anything can cause me a bit of gripe nowadays. I bought this off eBay for 99p last year. Oh, it's so handy when you're spraying a lot of stuff. I did my local Warhammer shops ZM terrain for the Necromunda stuff that came out last year, and spraying all of that with this was so handy. It's just basically a little trigger thing, and as I say, it is 99p in the shop. And all you do is, it's got a little bit there, a little trigger. You make sure that hole, don't look at it like I just did. You make sure that gap there sits on the nozzle, and then what you do is you then tighten it with that, and you pull the trigger. It just makes your life super easy. It makes everything so much better. So yeah, so I'm gonna go out and spray with these and my little handle. Ka-chow. Okay, so I've base coated everything. I haven't gone super in depth on it. You can see there's some bleed of the red underneath there, because I'm gonna use some of the Vallejo primer to sort of tackle those bits if I need to. I've decided to keep the weights, so all I've done is I've just placed the weights in the areas there. One of them was glued on, so I didn't do that. You can see on some of the ones that were heavily weathered, the black hasn't covered everything, but that's okay, because I'm going to cover that when I airbrush them in a second. The ones that were heavily weathered by the store, I don't know if you can see it, there's quite a bit of texture on them, so hopefully we'll be able to deal with that. But no, the black coverage is quite nice. what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop these all together, do a nice little time lapse for you. Okay, I'm going to say it now. They were a lot harder to put back together than they were to take apart. So I used this little tool again, this nail file, nail cleaner, whatever you want to call it. Just to sort of, the first couple you will have seen me struggle, but basically what I had to do was just sort of pop them back in, and they were extremely tight to put back together. So yeah, now seeing them all on their little wagon bottoms makes me think, oh yeah, they look really great. So what I'm going to do is I am going to crack out the airbrush. I will try and talk through as much of it as I can for you. I will probably do a voiceover because it means that I can stop the sound of the airbrush and just talk over it for you all. So yeah, I will speak to you guys in a sec. So when I'm airbrushing, you can see here I use Airbrush Flow Improver by Vallejo and Airbrush Thinners by Vallejo, as well as the Vallejo Black Primer. You can see that the coverage on this is really good. Obviously I've already sprayed these wagons with the Black Halfords primer, but this helps fill in all the gaps that you've missed, and it's exceedingly good when you don't want to use too much spray paint because you don't want to lose any of the detail. So I sprayed all the wagons, which you will have already seen. I've also just given a very light dusting on the sort of the walkway bits that go on the top, mainly for the underside of them, because some of them are grey. We're going to be going over that with metallics anyway. However, I did completely forget about the wheels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give them a light dusting with the black, because they're sort of like a dark metal, some of them, and some of the plastic ones. But I just want to sort of give them that uniform sort of colour, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do them black, and then when I move on to the next colour, I'm going to go on to sort of like a blacky brown and sort of coat these with them. I think it would be your rail grime, or if it was a rail match it would be like sleeper grime or something like that. But I'm going to be using a mix of this Vallejo Air Black. I never used to like this, but it is much better for the weathering process of things than the surface primer is. The surface primer is sort of a means to an end, is that the right term? Basically, I use this to just get a basic coverage on things. It's not my favourite paint to use, but it does very well when you're airbrushing on sort of, when you're using the spray can, you don't want to use it a lot because you don't want to clog up all the detail. So then you get a light dust covering over the top with the spray can, and then you can use this to sort of fill in the gaps, and they sort of work quite nicely together. My friend Jodie from Smiling on the Inside Painting loves spraying everything in all in airbrush primer. I do not have the patience for it, but I like the paint, and it's a very nice paint when you're looking for a matte black as well. So yeah, we're gonna do a mix of black and a mix of burnt umber, and I'll be back with you guys in a sec. Okay, so I've gone through and just given a quick brown black over the top of these. I decided to not go straight to black and just went with the brown black on there with the burnt umber and the Vallejo black on there. That concludes part one of this weathering and painting tutorial. Please leave comments down below if you have any opinions or anything, or even if you think that the wagon should be a different colour. I can't guarantee that the video will have not already been filmed going forward, but the way I think it's all planned out is that in between part one and part two there's going to be another video anyway, mainly because I've held fire on the wagons just so that I can do some other little things. Next video coming out should be a video of what I do when I'm doing commission work. So I've started doing commission weathering for trains, and I decided to film the process for doing that, and hopefully that'll get uploaded soon as well. These videos are quite nice to do, but the actual editing process is the part that takes a while, because when you're doing it you can just flick the camera on, as long as you keep an eye on the battery and stuff. That's something that you need to keep an eye on. Then you can film it all, but then you have to sort of speed everything up, put in the like the narration and stuff on there, which is something that it's fun when you're doing it, but you have to have a block of time to sit down and do it. So yeah, please leave comments down below. If you would like to get in touch about getting anything weathered by myself, then you can drop an email to emperorspathcontact@gmail.com, or drop me a message and I'll see if there's anything I can do. Otherwise, enjoy your week, weekend, weekday, morning, afternoon, good night, and I will see you guys soon. Thanks very much. Bye!